Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We'll give everyone about 30 seconds to a minute to settle in, whether you're grabbing lunch, grabbing a coffee, checking your Slack notifications, or trying to figure out if AT&T is working today. And then we'll get started shortly here. All right, so we can go ahead and kick off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on navigating risk, how threat intelligence is transforming financial services. We have an incredible panel for you today, including two cyber threat intelligence managers and one of our own intelligence consultants. But before we introduce our panel, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. So this webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive an email with the recording likely sometime later today. If you want to rewatch us instead of Netflix, you can go ahead. And then if you do have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'd love to have this be as interactive as possible. Our panelists have incredible experience both in the financial services industry and utilizing threat intelligence. And while this webinar is geared towards financial services organizations, if you did find your way into this webinar and are not from a financial institution, you are allowed to stay, and I think you'll get a lot of actionable information out of it. But with that, I'll kick it over to our first panelist, Leah, to get us started.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Cure. I am a cyber threat intelligence manager at Citizens Bank. I've been with the bank for about 5 years on and off, and been in threat intelligence for 5 years as well. I started off in data loss prevention and then moved over to threat intelligence, and just love the intelligence sharing community and everything around it. My team mainly focuses on a lot of strategic intelligence and finished intel. But we work really closely with our tactical intelligence team that does a lot of threat hunting. And then we also have insider threat within our threat intelligence team as well. So that's kind of how we're structured over at Citizens Bank. So I'll pass it over to you, Christopher, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Christopher Martinkus. I am the VP of Threat Intelligence at a North American commercial bank. My corporation doesn't allow me to use our name, but I'm sure with a little bit of OSINT, anyone can figure out where I actually work for. I've been running the program of threat intelligence here for about 5 years. I stood it up from really nothing. And prior to that, I did a lot of work in IT compliance, security, audit, and red teaming. And then I kind of switched over about 5 years ago to standing up our threat intel program.
Yeah, kick it over to me. Nick Raynell, one of the intelligence consultants here supporting our North America strategic clients for Recorded Future. I've been with the company for just about 2 years now. Prior to that, I was in the U.S. government working on anti-money laundering and counter-proliferation operations for about 6-ish years. And then prior to that, I worked for a moderate-sized bank as well, doing anti-money laundering investigations prior to that. So, yeah, looking forward to the chat today.
Awesome. And my name is Sam Langrock. I'm a senior product marketing manager at Recorded Future, focused on our solutions-driven go-to-market strategy. I don't have as cool of a threat intelligence background as our other panelists today, but I did work for MasterCard for about 2 years, so I think we can count that as my financial services experience. Okay, so let's kick off the webinar, and by looking at a question I posed to Recorded Future AI. And for those not familiar, Recorded Future AI helps users quickly derive insights from the Recorded Future platform or ask questions through our chat functionality, as I did here. But I wanted to put myself in the shoes of Leah and Christopher. So my question was, I'm a cyber threat intelligence manager for a financial services organization in North America. What types of threats should I be most concerned with? And the results are interesting, but perhaps not too surprising. I should be prioritizing threat types like APT groups, ransomware groups, Although I should be able to celebrate Lockbit being shut down for a few more days. And it also tells me, vulnerabilities and exploits, insider threats, general cybersecurity best practices, such as implementing MFA. So I'll begin the webinar by posing the first question to Leah. Are there one or two of these threats from this list that we need to be concerned with, or are there other threats out there that are keeping you or your organization up at night?
Yeah, so this is, it did a great job. We, at the end of every year, we do, or the beginning of every year, end of every year, we do like a forecast report where we'll look at threats and trends from the previous year and then make predictions about what we're going to see in the upcoming year. And this hit on a lot of the stuff that we included in that. So good job, AI. But yeah, I think obviously APTs, the geopolitical threat landscape right now is something that is there's a lot of focus on, especially with things happening today with the internet out or the cellular outages. Everyone's first question is, okay, is this a nation state action that's happening? So obviously big one, Lockbit, happy that that's done, but well, for now. But ransomware obviously continues to be a significant threat, whether to our organization individually or to our third parties. So it's just going to continue to be a big one. I think for me personally, the thing that keeps me up at night, a big one is supply chain attacks, because it's a big one that feels like we can have a lot of control over a lot of these things. We can put mitigations in place to defend against them and hope that it catches it. But with supply chain attacks, a lot of the times, especially with vendors, there's not a whole lot that you can do to prevent them. What you have to do is prevent the follow-on impacts that happen from them. So I think while these all hit the mark, I think for me, supply chain attacks are like the biggest, most terrifying threat. But you look at last year and MoveIt, that supply chain attack really was ransomware. Was the biggest issue that came from that for thousands of customers. So yeah, I think this did a very good job at hitting a lot of those big threats.
Yeah, I'll echo Leah and say probably our biggest what we consider a threat would be the supply chain risks. You see a lot of financial institutions are very heavily regulated. So we have a lot of controls in place. You've got your Federal Reserve, you've got your OCC, whoever your regulators are. You're constantly going through exams and audits and constantly having those controls tested. Where outside of the financial industry, there's a lot less regulation, especially in the technology service providers area. And that's where you see a lot of these breaches that are occurring. I know for us, we've seen way more attacks on our third-party service providers than we have seen targeting us specifically. And that's actually where we've seen a lot more of our data that has gotten out is somebody got hit with MoveIt, and we have a vendor of ours that we do file transfers through MoveIt. And that's how some of our data gets leaked out. And now we have to do our customer disclosures and stuff like that. So I think our biggest risk or threat we would consider would be third-party service providers. And with that, we, similar to Leah's organization, we do a quarterly assessment of all the threat actors that are in ETDA, the threat actor encyclopedia. And we go through and categorize the various threat actors by the industries that they target, and find which actors put us most at risk, and then do control assessments based on MITRE and those techniques to kind of see where our highest risk profiles are.
Yeah, thanks for that, Leah and Christopher. I'll turn it over to Nick. You work with some of our largest financial services clients, and imagine all the threats that they face. Is it also kind of similar to Leah and Christopher, where maybe it's supply chain attacks that are top of mind and top of concern?
Yeah, so not going to essentially blow anyone's mind here, but it's essentially the same with my financial services clients that I work with. I would say that it varies depending upon the level of responsibility that each of the teams that I have, that I work with have, as it relates to supplier or third-party incidents that they have to investigate. Fortunately, the teams that I work with have done a pretty good job at segmenting out and tiering their different third-party and suppliers, which makes it a lot easier for me as their consultant to kind of advise within Recorded Future. These are the companies that you probably want to set up like real-time alerting for. These are the companies that maybe you can have daily or weekly alerting. And then even segmenting it out even further with mentions on ransomware extortion sites or just general mentions on the dark web. So yeah, I would say absolutely third-party and supplier incidents are probably at top of mind. And getting a better sense from Recorded Future's perspective, the quickest way to alert them on that, and at the same time keeping the false positives quite low. That from my feedback that I've heard is we don't want to be killed with alerting. So to the extent that we can work on tuning any of the third-party alerts that we have set up to ensure that if we're going to be notified, we can inform the correct folks from the third-party risk or GRC teams without running the risk of providing them some kind of irrelevant information.
Yeah, and kind of so kind of a plug for the Recorded Future side. So like we actually have it set up with a watch list of all of our critical third parties in there. And we have alerts set up based on those watch lists to alert us of any like SEC 8K disclosures, any breaches or like tweets or anything like that mentioning breaches, cyber incidents, those sorts of things. And we go through those on a daily basis. AT&T would be one that popped up today. And so any types of incidents that way about that, like that, and then we work directly with our third-party risk team to get that information to them in as quickly as possible, so that then they can reach out to those vendors and figure out what they need to do if it was a data breach or it's an incident, and then they can track SLAs and stuff like that on their side.
We do a very similar thing. And we found with a lot of these, like whether it be a supply chain attack or significant vulnerability that is disclosed and likely going to impact several different organizations, we've actually sometimes done proactive communications to a lot of those like tier one vendors to say, hey, we'll put together communication proactively and say, hey, we know this is coming out. Are you affected by this? What are you doing about it? And just trying to get like a legal attestation to say like, we're good or we're working on it. So yeah, I think like that collaboration between third party and third party risk is super important with that.
Yeah, we've actually had it where one alert came through that a third party of ours was listed on a ransomware site, and we actually were notifying that vendor before they even knew that they were listed on there. And so that was a whole triage and figuring out what our impact level is and stuff. But yeah.
That always feels, it doesn't feel good, but it feels a little bit good that you're like, we found it.
I was going to ask, what is kind of the response from the third party when you reach out and say, hey, you might not know about this, but we just found this?
So in that specific case, they initially came back and said, we don't have any record of any incident going on. We don't know what you're talking about. And then a few hours later, they kind of came out and they were like, we know of an incident going on, and we will be informing you of our discovery process. Like then they went the whole legal route.
Yeah, it's often very shielded, and we're only going to give you legal jargon to tell you what's going on. But as long as you can get it in writing and kind of pursue it that way, yeah.
But that proactive visibility is helpful for just making sure you can shore up the gaps related to those supply chain vendors.
Yeah, and like from our team, we go a little bit further. We actually will go out, like if we were to see like a threat actor listing data or publishing data, we have tools and capabilities to go out and see if our organization was impacted in that data set, or any of our data resides within that data set. So we'll actually proactively go and make sure that we're not affected, because sometimes third parties do take a very long time to go through their incident response process, and they're going to communicate it at the very end of their process, which could be a week, 2 weeks, month down the line, where it's better for us to be on top of things and get out to we feel like it's better to get out to our customers as soon as possible, and trying to be proactive with that.
Actually, Sam, if I could pop in really quick there. When Christopher is mentioning that, one thing that came to mind with one of my financial services clients, there's a source within Recorded Future called the ransomware victim metadata analysis, Christopher, I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to or if it's a separate process that you guys have internally. But the situation where it popped up with one of my clients here, it was a similar situation where they had a dialogue going on with a vendor. The vendor said that there was no data of theirs impacted from their initial investigation. We had still set up an alert that notified them from the source, and essentially what the source does, I think we're up to about 20 to 25 different ransomware extortion sites where we're analyzing the metadata from the actual leaked files to look for references to your own company or any other company that you want to add to that list for a query. And my client was notified of references to their organization in files in the leaked data. So we weren't actually downloading, providing those files, but it gave them that lead to then go back to their supplier and say, hey, I appreciate that you guys are going through the investigation here, but we've confirmed that our data is included in this leaked set of data. So that was a great win for us, for the client, because they were actually even able to go back to their GRC team and say, here's all of this information we have for you. They already went through and actually acquired some of those files themselves. So it made the GRC team, their lives like immensely easier from that perspective.
No, that's a great story. Thanks for hopping in, Nick. I guess to kind of throw around a quick question, we just talked a little bit ransomware, and our AI tool brought up Lockbit. Leah brought up Lockbit. We just saw Lockbit get shut down. We just had a webinar yesterday actually where 2,000 people showed up to kind of hear what's the state of the ransomware industry. I guess throwing around quickly to our panelists, like, what are your expectations with Lockbit shutting down and the ransomware economy? Is it like it's a win, but we'll probably see it shooting back up? I'll start with you, Leah.
It's definitely a win, right? Like Lockbit was so active and the fact that we're able to like defend against it now, the decryption keys are available and all of that's massive, that's big. But I think Alan, I was on the webinar earlier this week, and I think maybe Alan was talking about it, where I think ultimately it's a good thing, but it is gonna make ransomware operators function differently. They're going to be more private with the way they're communicating. They're going to go through channels that they need to allow people to access versus just letting anyone into. So as defenders, it'll make it harder because we don't know exactly what they're doing, exactly what they're talking about, and how they're operating. We don't have those insights there. I think in terms of, will there be another Lockbit coming out? Maybe. I think that a lot of the affiliates will probably scatter and go to other groups. So I don't think ransomware is going to stop. I think that it's going to continue to be a profitable business. But I do think it's optimistic I'm optimistic to see law enforcement stepping in a lot more, not only with ransomware, but a lot of the botnets that we're seeing. I'm optimistic that it will have impacts, and it will kind of make threat actors think a bit more about how they're doing things and not just be very overly confident about their actions. And so it's kind of like this cat and mouse. It's going to push them harder. We're going to push them harder. But I'm optimistic that these actions will be helpful in the long run. maybe I'm too optimistic, but I don't know.
No, I think that that's a great point. And I do think we've kind of seen this play out before with Conti, especially. They had their leak, they had their whole playbooks leaked and everything like that. The affiliates did scatter, but those variants associated with Conti came back up. And so I would kind of anticipate seeing other variants based on Lockbit, based on what those programmers know. They're going to stand up other variants that are similar to Lockbit. They probably won't be called Lockbit, but it's kind of one of those, it's kind of like the Hydra theory. Is you cut off one head, you end up with two. So that's kind of my anticipation. It's a vacuum. These are criminal organizations. It's not like, oh, my tool got taken away, I'm just going to stop being a criminal. No, they just kind of move on to the next thing. And I think right now, taking down of Lockbit, I think it was great, especially the fact that the decryption keys were released. So any of the organizations that were impacted actually have a way to unlock their files and their systems. But I think at the end of the day, there are going to be, it's a vacuum, and you're going to see other players come into that vacuum, fill that void, and try and take advantage of moving up, moving their business model forward. And I think Leah's absolutely right. I think that they are going to get more protective with some of the services that they use, more selective with the services that they use, and make it harder to get taken down. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet.
Nick, anything you want to add, working with our clients and what they've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's very easy to become pessimistic when you're talking about ransomware groups. But I do agree with Christopher and Leah that you can't always view every single incident like this as just like, hey, it's only going to be another week or two before the next big group pops up. This is how you have impact on these types of groups. You have to, affect change by taking law enforcement action. And I think if they are successful in taking down the actual administration behind Lockbit, hopefully $10 million is enough motivation for someone to speak up. I think that will have a significant impact because, and especially if those individuals can be taken into custody if they're currently living in a non-permissive country, at least from the U.S. perspective. So I do think that we'll see similar instances that we saw previously with other ransomware affiliates, probably going and figuring out where could I use my services, which one will pay well, which one will have better operational security. But I think that where you'll actually start to see change is if you have more companies deciding not to actually pay the ransom. That's certainly is easier said than done when you're looking at something that can completely change the course of your business or the stock price, so on and so forth. But I think a good example as to why actually paying the ransom is not great for any industry in the long term is you saw with Lockbit that for a few victims, they told the victims, yep, you paid the ransom, we've deleted your data. And then FBI and NCAA both came out and said, we've seen significant amounts of victim data that was still in some of their Lockbit servers. So that's where I believe you'll start to see more change if it becomes more common for victims to just stop refusing to paying the ransom.
Good points. So summing up, kind of a win for today, but time to prepare for tomorrow. So moving on, I'll toss over to Christopher to start this, but what are some of your key priorities for improving your defenses this year?
Yeah, so 2024, one of the big things we're focused on is working in the fraud space. So we're actually moving forward with the payment fraud module in Recorded Future. That's kind of one of the big wins that I was able to get into our budget. And working towards getting more of that, some of those partial pans, full pan data, and then working with our fraud team on risk rating those cards and that leaked data to either reissue or do a risk scoring, however fraud decides to do that. But kind of bringing more threat intelligence into the fraud space. That's kind of one of our key priorities this year.
You would think that we talked about this in advance because I would say the exact same thing. But yeah, we've been developing our relationships with our fraud teams internally and just kind of making the processes that we have better. And it's something that we've been doing for years, but we just are really now getting the time, resources, and attention for it, which has been nice. And I think on like a larger scale too, just cross collaboration for multiple teams, not just our fraud teams, but teams within our cyber defense umbrella, teams within risk, other business lines across the bank that aren't even security related. I think that's a big focus for us this year is just enhancing our collaboration. We get so much information and we do our best to disseminate it out to our internal stakeholders. But there are only so many people that we can reach. We only have so many resources to do that. And so this year we're really working on, okay, who are receiving the reports that we're already disseminating and who could benefit from them? How easy is it to add someone to the send line? And so I think that's a big thing for us this year is just increasing that visibility on our intelligence and ensuring that our assessments we're not just sending information to teams, but we're actually sending intelligence. We're assessing risk and communicating why it's relevant and important to us and why people should care about it. So yes, I agree with Christopher 100%, definitely improving our fraud functions, but also just like cross collaboration as a whole across teams, across the bank.
I think that's a very great point that doesn't get brought up enough with threat intelligence, is the collaboration across teams and outside of just cyber and security. There are many different teams across an organization that can benefit from threat intelligence. Some of the teams that like I work a lot with is like marketing communications for brand monitoring. We work with we integrated really well with our third-party risk management team with regards to third-party breaches, and if we're doing acquisitions of third parties, bringing in that intelligence ahead of time and doing an assessment of, is this a third party that we want to bring in? There are a number of teams outside of just your typical SOC, your security team, that you can integrate with. It goes into your disaster BCP DR team, and multiple others, non-technical teams that threat intelligence I believe threat intelligence should interact with.
And a lot of times our jobs as threat intelligence specialists is to literally just be a translator for people between really technical like terms and concepts and communicating why that's a risk and why we should care about it. And so I think being able to communicate with, we already do it every day. And so being able to communicate that with different business lines across the bank who they're going to present them. So just kind of being able to communicate that, we're already positioned really well to do that.
Yeah, and I think back to the early days of the pandemic, where that's a great example of a non-technical incident where threat intelligence, we were able to integrate with our business continuity plan and figure out and execute our pandemic plan that we had in place at very, very early stages, and had by activating it early, we were able to get ahead of the curve and ahead of all the questions. And we were able to provide constant data as the pandemic was evolving in those very early days. And there wasn't really good, solid information, but we were at least able to bring some clarity and some consistency to the information that was provided out to those teams.
Awesome. And Nick, from the client side, is it fraud too? Is it communication? What are they looking for help with?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the cross collaboration is one thing that's come up. I think fortunately for the clients that I work with, their threat intelligence programs are pretty advanced and pretty mature. But I will say that they're all fairly large organizations, and I think with that sometimes comes like a bit of the business silo aspect. And so what we've had to do with them is kind of walk before we run. So we're showing value in terms of like what threat intelligence can provide them. And it allows them to take some of those examples where like it was very beneficial, go to a different team that they work with, but really hasn't been leveraging threat intelligence in the past. So for example, one of my clients has our identity intelligence module, and they've had some really good hits on some of the malware log data that they're getting for leaked credentials. Previously, they were, from what we were told, that was really only being shared within their CTI team. It wasn't actually even going to their identity and access management team. And so one of their initiatives after they started sending some of this data over there was now to integrate directly with their Okta tenant. So that is, it's almost been a mix between like there's clearly an understanding for the need for cross collaboration, but the CTI teams that we work with almost have to do like a business pitch to these other teams to say like, hey, listen, we're not trying to give you more work. We're trying to, if anything, make your lives easier. So that's definitely been a common theme across all of my financial services clients. One other thing to kind of differentiate from what the group has been saying so far too, or to kind of give a different perspective, one of the key things that we try to do with all of our clients, but certainly the ones that are, I would say, higher in the maturity scale that have already existing intelligence requirements, is try to align those intelligence requirements with their active alerting rules in recorded future. It's just a good practice in general, but it also allows them to figure out, hey, we have pretty clear gaps for these priority threats that were intel requirements that we're tracking. Can we close that with you, or do we need to acquire that data elsewhere? And then it, by doing that as well, it allows them to better track kind of their ROI, which obviously for us is very important because we want them to actually get clear value from the money that they're spending with us. So that is another key aspect that I'm working on for this year with some of those Fiserv clients.
One of the things you said, Nick, resonates with me because I think sometimes, like when we send intelligence to other teams, we have had instances where they're like, "Oh, are you trying to put more work on us? We already have so much on our plates. This is just more that we have to deal with." But I think what's helped for us is a lot of teams have realized that instead of just like playing whack-a-mole for things, our intelligence allows them to be more proactive. So they're armed and empowered to like have actions to thwart those threats and reduce fraud before it even happens. And so just positioning it that way has been really helpful for us to just show that like we're trying to help. We're allowing you to be proactive so that you're not always just climbing up this endless hill, and you can kind of be ahead of the threats versus just being behind them and reacting to them.
Yeah, I'll kick it back to you, Sam, in 1 second. But what you were mentioning there, Leah, is a really good point too about kind of being more proactive. There is the same client that I'm thinking of. They work pretty closely with their detection engineering team, as you'd imagine. But previously, that team was not really making use of any of the detection rules that our INSIC group puts out into the platform, just because they didn't have consistent access in the platform. They would typically have had to request that from the platform users. So they weren't even aware that it was available. On top of that, they have a Splunk integration with us. So they did find out that with our Splunk integration, they have the ability to add in some of our Sigma rule detections that INSIC group has put in place in a more automated fashion. So they don't necessarily have to go into the intelligence card, download the actual Sigma rule, send it over to the team. It's a way for them to actually take some of that work off their plate, or even to augment what the team's already doing. So that we've had some success there with, like you mentioned, Leah, is just telling teams, we're definitely not trying to put more work on your plate. Just let us help you. And usually that's well received.
Yeah, I think I was actually talking to a client in the tech space, and one thing that they do is they kind of go around and to their various departments and they say, hey, here's everything that we look at it on a daily basis. Here's everything we actually take action on it. And then at the tippy top, like, here's everything that we actually send to you. So you can kind of see that full range. But I think, Nick, you kind of brought up some great points of how you're helping our clients leverage recorded future. I'll throw it over to Christopher and then to Leah, but what are some of the ways that you kind of operationalize recorded future in your workflows?
Yeah, so I think one of the daily things that we do, we have threat intelligence reports that we are providing out, and we leverage the AI capability. This can be we use this from describing out CVEs and whether they're actively exploited, how would an actor exploit a CVE, and giving that over to our vulnerability management team. To like or provide a summary of the AT&T incident that happened today, and taking that and being able to summarize a blurb and then get that out to executive management in a very quick manner, because they're going to be seeing it on the news and they're going to have questions. So being able to kind of head that off a little bit. We also do a lot with our third-party risk management team and our vulnerability team in the having our tech stack watch lists filled out and alerting on CVEs as well as breaches. There's just so much you can do in recorded future that I can't actually go into everything, but yeah.
We'd be here forever if we were going on. Yeah. Very similar to what Christopher was talking about. We do a lot of that stuff. One of the interesting use cases that we've come across recently, we're working a bit more with our red team. And so as they're going through their engagements, they'll submit RFIs to us about, okay, this is the engagement we're gonna go through, and here are some of the things that we're thinking of doing. Do you have any real life use cases or incidents or campaigns or threat actors that are targeting this environment, using these TTPs, et cetera? And so we'll kind of use INSIC group reports, recorded futures platform to sort of put all of that together and send that over to them. So that's been a really helpful use case for us in developing that relationship with our red team and also fulfilling those RFIs that we have to just kind of outline exactly what has happened in the past, and this is how it's been done, and this is how you can do it. So that's been helpful for us. And similar to what we were talking about earlier about third-party risk, we do a lot with monitoring ransomware extortion sites and third parties on extortion sites with recorded future and looking at that type of thing, just to ensure that do we need to do more investigations? Are we a third party of this organization, et cetera? So those are a lot of the things that we're doing and everything that Christopher said too. Yeah.
I think I just thought of one other really cool example of something that we use the platform for, and it's malware reverse engineering. So we'll get phishing payloads and phishing emails, and using the sandbox to detonate. They have a really cool sandbox feature where you can actually interact with the malware and click on every link that's in the malware and execute each individual part. And we use that as part of our reverse engineering process to figure out what types of malware are targeting us. Because a lot of times you end up with an initial dropper that ends up calling a loader, and then you have the actual banking Trojan or something later on down the pipeline. Being able to go through that entire tree and analyze, hey, here is the type of malware that is targeting us, so that we can then build out detection engineering rules to hopefully combat that in the future.
That's actually really good. Again, it's almost as if we were coordinating all of our answers here. But it's a good segue because, I think a lot of clients of mine, and really probably most CTI teams have some understanding of the threat actors that they need to focus on, the pieces of malware they need to focus on, whether it's from previous experience of direct impacts where they were targeting their firm or just the broader industry in general. But one thing that I think everyone tries to do more of is focus more on the TTPs in general. And so one of the things that I've done with a few of my 5-star clients over the past year is, in addition to any of the exercises they do on their own for adversary profiling, we have our own exercise that we run with them. Traditionally, it was always something we did offline. More aspects of that have been incorporated into Recorded Future with the threat actor profiling matrix, malware, and then also we'll be introducing the TTP matrix as well into the platform. But using that information, I think has been really helpful for them because it kind of gets them further up that pyramid of pain, and it allows them to actually go back to their leadership and say, hey, we're not just monitoring for any random mention of the company. Like, this is the type of work that we're doing that I think is even more beneficial for the organization as a whole. Because ultimately that's really what you want to focus on. And that's really what's going to be helpful for the red teams. We're working with them and figuring out where gaps are for TTPs. So that's definitely one of the things that has come up for my clients that have said, hey, this is what we want to focus on for this coming year.
Awesome. Perhaps something else they might want to focus on or are interested in, and we kind of kicked the webinar off with this, but some of the AI functionality. Nick, we were talking yesterday and kind of mentioned some of your clients, especially in the financial services space, are a little bit conservative when it comes to the use of AI. So, what do you think some of the benefits might be in the financial services industry, or even vice versa? Is AI a concern because threat actors are weaponizing it more? What are your thoughts there?
All of the above. No, I do think that it's correct that my clients definitely are, as a whole, more conservative when it comes to adopting AI. I have at least one of my financial services clients has kind of outright banned ChatGPT from internally. So for them, the fact that Recorded Future has our own AI capability in the platform, Recorded Future is already a trusted tool. That is something that's allowed, so they can still make use of AI capabilities, and the benefit also of it being trained on Recorded Future's intelligence graph. But I think as a whole, it's not exactly a surprise, and it probably won't come to any surprise to anyone on this call, that financial services as a whole is going to be more conservative. Obviously, there's more regulatory requirements. Data loss prevention is even more of an issue. So I think that it's probably going to be more of a wait and see effect for most moderate, even smaller, the larger banks, before it's fully adopted. But I do think that there absolutely could be very real benefits of making this more integrated into their daily workflows. From my own perspective, if I was in a role similar to Christopher or Leah in their respective organizations, I'd want to take away all of the tedious work, and if there is a way for me to not necessarily expose any sensitive data, but utilize the capabilities of AI right now to do that, absolutely, because it's going to make my life better on a daily basis. So yeah, that's just some initial thoughts, I think from my perspective.
Yeah, we've taken the approach of full out blocking AI, ChatGPT, and other Google Bard. So we've taken that approach. We get around that from a threat intel's perspective because we have Recorded Future as an onboarded platform. And we have our contractual agreements, which cover the AI licensing and stuff like that. And the amount of time that we save by being able to use the AI feature, just being able to query it and have it run through 5-10 different articles, which if me or my team were to have to go through and read those articles ourselves, like we're talking hours sometimes of articles that we would end up reading through. And just to be able to get the quick summary blurb that we need to get to management, it saved us tremendously. The other really nice thing is it's integrated into the mobile app, and has made the mobile app so much more useful, especially when like I'm on the road or something like that, and I just need to get something out quick, or do some quick research, just being able to pull up the mobile app and put in a quick query and get the blurb that I need to text over to my CISO or something like that. That's been immensely helpful.
In a similar way, like I think it allows us to spend more time and resources on those assessments on and what's like actually important to say, to define and really go through the risk. And it gives us more time to investigate, okay, do we have assets that are vulnerable to this vulnerability? Like, do we are our assets configured a certain way that would actually make it vulnerable? So we're able to dig in more and we're not spending as much time writing a summary about what the incident is. So that's really helpful for us. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think especially as financial institutions where we're so regulated, there is this really difficult challenge of if we're not leveraging AI within our technologies at our organization, are we going to fall behind? But also at the same time, are we going to start leveraging these technologies and open us up to risks? Because there's still so much unknown, and we're still learning about all of them. So that's been a big challenge for us is, working with our business lines and our technology services to help enable them to utilize these because it is incredible technology, but also not saying no to everything, continuing business continuity and trying to find that balance of let's continue to move forward and progress as an organization, but doing it securely. So I think in that space, a lot of times, like you can butt heads with other business lines who are just like full speed ahead. But that's definitely been a challenge that we've experienced. And then I've heard from several other FIs that they've experienced as well. So I think in the next few years, it's been in every single question that we've had, presentation that we've created, education session that we've done for other teams. AI and GPT technology is just like continuously brought up, but for good reason. So I love it and I hate it.
I actually think one thing that has come up with a few of my clients too was they've had to, a lot of them have almost had to become like miniature subject matter experts with LLMs, which I would wager that most people 2 years ago probably had never even heard of an LLM, or much less work with it on a daily basis. So I think there is still the battle of education and understanding like what the actual limits are of the current AI models that are most employed by the majority of companies, including Recorded Future. It's definitely not going to be a solve all problem, but I think understanding and having at least a moderate background on what the capabilities of the tools are will allow you to better utilize them as well. And on top of that, it would probably allow you to better educate other organizations or stakeholders within your organization that might have some preconceived notion about, well, AI is just going to kind of make up some answer. Obviously, that's always a worry with generative AI, is ensuring the validity of the answers and the references that it provides you. So I think obviously not tooting Recorded Future's own horn, but I like the fact that with our AI, it actually provides you the specific references that is driving an answer. So with other GPT tools, it's sometimes difficult to figure out, all right, how did you actually come to that answer? I'm not an expert in trigonometry or something. Like, how do I know that you're not just making an answer up? The benefit of Recorded Future AI, from what I've seen, from my own daily usage of it and from my clients, the feedback we've had is like the fact that the sources are provided right there for you to actually back up an answer is incredibly helpful, and I think goes a long way in kind of driving up the trust you would have in that AI model.
I think something else, I think that's a great point. And I think something else that Recorded Futures AI has that benefits it over other models is it's trained almost specifically on cyber type data. as opposed to those other open models that have all the other inputs across the internet and extra data that tends to leak in and more likely is going to give a false answer or a false positive, whereas the recorded future data is very specific to our industry and cyber, where you're going to get a more accurate answer out of the data set.
No, that's a great way to sum it up. Last round, and I guess we'll make it a lightning round. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But I guess, Christopher, I'll start with you. Whether in cybersecurity or in threat intelligence or something in the market, is there something that really has you excited for 2024?
Ooh, there's a lot of going on. I think the big thing that I'm excited is I've noticed a lot more organizations being more willing to collaborate and share across organizations, and just sit down and have threat intel teams from Bank X and Bank Y sitting down on a call for 30 minutes and just kind of talking about, hey, this is what we do. Here's the challenges that I have, and sharing ways to improve our practices. I think I've seen kind of the community starting to open up, where it used to be like 5 years ago, it was kind of closed. Everything was close to the vest. You didn't want to share your secrets or anything. The community has really opened up and become more collaborative, and helping everyone get better, because we're all in this together and we're all after the same objective at the end of the day.
Good answer. I think for me, I'm seeing a lot more opportunities and working groups for women in the security space. I think I'm part of a couple different groups, not just for threat intelligence and security, but also women in technology. And I'm seeing the growth in those groups. It's just growing tremendously, and kind of similar to what Christopher was talking about, but a lot of collaboration and information sharing, and even just like sharing things about work experience and things like that. I guess I'm a little bit biased in this space, but it's been really incredible to see the growth in the past few years, and I'm really optimistic that's just going to continue. So for me, that's a big thing that I'm excited about for this coming year, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Well, I'll give my perspective a quick lightning answer here. What I'm most excited about, at least from Recorded Future's perspective, I would say that the ability and the creation of one of the new tools and features that we have within Recorded Future is called Collective Insights. So I'm sure that Leah and Christopher probably are aware of that, and some other clients that are on the call right now, existing clients. But I think it's an aspect of Recorded Future that's brand new, and that I think historically there's been this idea that Recorded Future is purely reliant upon open source information, some proprietary sourcing, but kind of lacked that ability to kind of bring in client specific data sets that were more relevant to them. So for my clients that have already been leveraging Collective Insights, and at least in the first phases of our rollout, we've seen some really interesting things come up from detections that they've seen in different logging sources that they're bringing in. That is, again, it kind of touches on a lot of stuff we've talked about, bringing in other teams that historically really hadn't been involved with the threat intelligence teams, but because of some of the data sources that they're now pushing back to Recorded Future for enrichment, it's something that I think we're kind of just scratching the surface of. Even more so, it's beneficial because it's a free service. It's something it's not requiring an additional contract or additional payment, which is always beneficial from the consulting side, because we don't, not being in sales, we want to give clients as much as benefit that they can get out of the platform. So I'm really excited to see where that goes with the continued improvements that are planned over the next year plus.
Perfect. And so, yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel to drop them in the chat. Leah, we do have a question for you over if you offer interior design consulting, because your office is turning some heads.
Thank you. And they're actually all real plants, and I don't know how I've kept them alive this long, but knock on wood, they're doing all right. So
Not a Zoom background. I guess I have a quick question for you, and maybe this is a quick one, but how would you explain, some of the nuances working in threat intelligence for a financial institution versus maybe a retail company or a tech company or maybe even a healthcare company?
Yeah, I think at least for me, because I've had experience like from the vendor side working with a lot of different organizations from different sectors. For me, I think it's just kind of thinking about like the assets that we care about and the crown jewels and what threat actors are targeting. So as a financial institution, obviously we have money, we have people's information. And so thinking about like how do we protect that information, it's very different than other organizations. The technologies that we use and the technologies that we use to move money are very critical. And if those go down, what will we do? What are our playbooks? So I think just kind of thinking about it in that way of I am a threat actor. I'm targeting a bank. What am I going to go after? Versus other sectors where they have their important data looks very different from ours. So I think from that perspective, it's just kind of prioritizing what your crown jewels are. And then what is the technology and the infrastructure that supports that and making sure those are protected.
Yeah, I'd echo that with just a slightly different view. I think threat intelligence is kind of the same across industries. I think the thing that varies is the actors that are targeting you and the motives behind it. Financial services industry obviously is going to be primarily targeted by financial gain, threat motivated threat actors. But if you're a government agency or a subcontractor of a government agency, you're going to see a lot more information theft and espionage. If you are maybe in a news or media organization, you might see more sabotage and trying to falsify information. Push false information. So I think it just the actors change and the motivations might change, but in general, we all have third-party services, we all have vulnerabilities, we all have technologies, and we all have our own brand and reputation to maintain. So I think at the end of the day, we all kind of have the same threat focus. It's just what threats are we focused on might change.
I guess one thing I'll mention, not necessarily maybe differences between different industries, but one thing that is definitely consistent and has been proven the past couple of years is the impact that geopolitical events can have on different organizations. It's very, I'm fortunate that I have clients in a variety of different spaces because I think it's interesting to see problems that different, financial services, aviation, manufacturing all have, their different perspectives and they all have their different threats they're dealing with. But at the end of the day, if there's a significant war that breaks out in the European continent, and there will absolutely be downstream effects regardless of what business you're in. If you're in banking, you have to worry about potential threats from an APT group, from foreign adversaries. If you are in manufacturing, what are the downstream effects of my supply chain, and will that impact my clients? I think it's unfortunately the past couple of years has proven that it's something that I think most organizations, regardless of what line of business or industry you're in, you just have to factor it in. So that is one thing that I think that is probably common and synonymous across different industries.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to close out. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about Recorded Future and you are a Recorded Future client, you can sign up to receive a personalized consultation. For non-clients, you can get started by requesting a demo. We'll drop some links for you in the chat. And if you're attending the FSISAC Spring Summit, I know Christopher, you'll be there. But make sure to stop by booth number 3 and don't miss our speaking session on Tuesday, March 5th from 2 to 2:45 p.m. with Recorded Future product manager Stas Alforoff on the CTI and fraud collaboration playbook, something we talked a little bit about today. And if you're looking for more information to satisfy your appetite for threat intelligence, learn how your peers are applying threat intelligence in our 2023 State of Threat Intelligence Report, and check out our library of videos from across our global Predict events, including a fireside chat with the CISO of BNP Paribas in London, a presentation on how to level up your security program by our presenter today, Christopher Martinkus, and a look at the ransomware landscape with Recorded Future ransomware sommelier expert Alan Liska. Pre-lock, but shutting down, of course. But thank you to all our presenters and attendees, and we hope to see you very soon.
Thank you.